In the name of keeping this video short, here's a quick introduction. I'm a nerd, I play video games, I like analyzing combat engagements in those video games with the idea of teaching and exposing factors people might not consider. This is my first breakdown video featuring Escape from Tarkov, and this episode is going to be touching on awareness, reactive play, and being decisive. Let's take a look at the loadout we were running with this one. We were running a mostly meta SA-58 with a PK-06 and obviously running M61. Now, you should pretty much always be running meta ammo, but the SA-58 itself provides pretty good reach, with most of the rounds being M80, M61, and M62 having enough speed and pen to hit far-out targets or targets behind glass. The gun also fires at 700 RPM, which is both a blessing and a curse. Its high fire rate means it's got a really good time to kill, but it also means that it's going to have a lot more recoil and be really difficult to use for longer range shots. You're not going to use this thing like an M4 when you're spraying down a hallway. But its rounds will retain the power to one-tap people at ranges if you can make the accurate shots. However, the SA-58 itself, because of this high RPM, does not lend itself well to magnified optics, and most people opt to stick with a PK-06 or some sort of red dot. This build is also unsuppressed, which gives us better ergo, but also means that our shots will be able to be heard across the map. So we spawned on the second floor, long hall, opposite of green room. We duck into the supply room to painkiller, and we were listening for any early information. We hear the button for Sector A get pressed, and that tells us there's at least one team on the other side of the map. As we move down the hallway, we hear shots break out somewhere between kitchen and red. This is immediately after the button was pressed, so we know for sure it's a second team. This game also took place during the time of the end of wipe events, where Gluhar and the Glucose Guardians were on labs, so it's likely that somebody ran into them there. We peek over the fencing, but we don't see any of the guards. We hear somebody press the medical button and it's go time. We heard no shots on our side, and we didn't hear anybody keycard in black room below us, so it's very likely that this is a trap. So as I come down, I'm very careful to keep my eye on the door to make sure nobody's waiting for me, and I don't push out hastily. We only hear one person, and we immediately start trading nades for position. It doesn't mean there's not somebody off to my left, or somebody who's waiting for me down the hallway, but I only hear one moving around. As I flub that nade and deny myself an ability to push, it becomes very obvious to me that not only has the other fight not made noise in a while, but we're the only fight currently making noise. Because we're still vying for space, I'm currently still locked in the staircase, and I become very paranoid about getting flanked. But having heard nothing else, I'm confident this guy's alone. I run to try to bait out some more nades so I can hopefully get to push this guy sooner. I traditionally use maps in this series, but because of the nature of how this fight unfolds and its massive verticality, we're going to have to do this differently. Because it's hard to use visuals in this kind of a scenario, I'm going to instead stop between phases and explain what happened, why it happened, and the effects it had on the fight. So, while waiting for this guy to throw a nade, we hear a step on metal above us. As we look up, we catch the corner of a guy's house backpack, which tells us it's on the second set of stairs above us. We try to put some suppressing fire on this guy, but we actually get lucky and take him out with the first burst. However, he has a teammate. So we move towards the stairs to attempt to reposition and put some solid cover between the two of us. As he appears to disengage, we're faced with a dilemma. We're still pincered, we're basically out of ammo in our 30-round magazine, and there's still a player on our level. However, it's not all bad. We have a few things working in our favor. Getting the kill on one of the guys that flanked us relieves us of a lot of pressure and builds a lot of momentum for us. We need to get out of this position before the player on our level pushes us. The guy above us is falling back, so we secure our position by throwing a nade which forces him to exit the doorway. Making it out of that sandwich, I quickly reload and look at my health situation. There's two things you should note in the situation. Because I have good health and I didn't take any hits, I opt to continue pushing and take the momentum that I got from getting the first kill and push on for the second one. I take the most direct route to keep the most amount of pressure on him, but there are different ways you can do this. You could rotate back through server behind me, go up the stairs, and attack him outside of green room. Also, unless there's another group that I'm unaware of, there's nothing currently stopping me from just exiting the situation and leaving these two to fight each other, and then returning later at a different time. Or potentially even doing a long flank and trying to get a long line of sight on somebody. But considering my optic, that's not exactly the kind of play I'm looking for. It's also worth mentioning that the only reason we have the space to actually make it out of this sandwich is because we got that first kill. If these guys decided to keep pushing and I didn't land that kill and they came down to the second floor landing there, there's no room for me to actually try to take it from them, and I become sandwiched between them and the guy on the bottom floor in a much more difficult situation than I'm currently in. After we reload, we push into this stairwell, still chasing this guy up above us. He holds us back with a nade, we wait it out, then we immediately push up after him. There's a second nade that comes out from the guy below us that we didn't expect. We stand still, that way the very angry man on the third floor doesn't know exactly where we're at, and we try to wait for him to cross. I miss the shot as he crosses, and I try to push up the stairs. However, I actually get greedy and try to sprint, even though I don't need to. And because of this, my gun isn't up when he crosses in front of me again. Because he saw me pushing up, I expect him to swing on to me as I come in, so I begin my pre-fire, and he walks straight out into it. From here, our priority is to heal up and get ammo in our gun, but it turns out the guy downstairs doesn't actually push onto us, so we have time to collect this man's loot and get ourselves geared up. And our friend's interesting HK leads us into round 3. So as I'm heading down the steps, I see this guy in the bottom. Not wanting to end up like the first gentleman, I dive into the wall as hard as I can, and I attempt to throw a nade down below. I wind up fucking up the nade, but I assume the sound of it gives me enough cover, and I try to take a shot to get some space. However, once I'm on the second floor, I throw a nade to make sure he's not in the stairwell with me, and then I'm free to abuse Tarkov's sound's pretty aggressive nature. Stairs in Tarkov are infamous for sound being all or nothing, where you're not hearing somebody above you until they're suddenly on top of you. The way this actually works is you can't hear what's above or below you until about the 50% threshold. So I walk down just enough until I can hear, and I listen for him to start pushing. And once he does, I walk up the stairs so that he hears one step and then nothing, and then I step back down and begin pre-firing, and he walks right into where I expect him to be. Despite all of our planning, the fight isn't pretty, but we do manage to come out victorious. However, we definitely expended our HK's mag considering how fast it fires, so instead of reloading, we opt to swap to the SA-58 in case there's a second teammate or something we didn't hear earlier. When fighting around stairs, if you're sure there's somebody else there, you can actually use Tarkov's consistently inconsistent audio to your advantage. Before we wrap up, I want to show that pushing from this angle, while it can work, is kind of difficult because you have so many different places to actually look and you can't be actually pre-aimed on any single one of them. Instead, you have to make a sweeping motion across all of them and check the angles as you go. Honestly, if you were going to do this, it would probably be most beneficial to do this with hipfire because you maintain the most velocity while moving, and if you're good with hipfiring, it's actually not inaccurate at all. Okay, so let's recap. In the beginning, we talked about listening for the audio, whether it be shots, map cues, or what have you, to identify where enemies are and get a general sense of the map before you even actually run into anybody. We also talked about being aware of the sound that you or your fight is making, and using that to preempt where enemies might be coming from when you consider your position. We talked about reactive play, and how even though I chose an option based on keeping momentum, you could easily have stopped and reconsidered and taken another option, or disengaged entirely. And then at the final portion, we looked at the result of being decisive in my situation, and we talked about how to fight using the audio in staircases a little better. I hope you guys liked the video. Please let me know what you think in the comments if you have any feedback. I'd like to make these better, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.